Yes to Life show of 2023 on UK Health Radio. New year, same host for the show. I'm Robin Daly, founder of the UK charity Yes to Life, that supports people with cancer who want to look beyond the boundaries of their conventional care to see what else they can do to support their own well-being and their return to good health. This approach is called integrative medicine or integrative oncology, and Yes to Life has been proactively advocating for it for nearly 2 decades. So to start the new year, my guest today is someone who's very familiar to many of you, legendary for her creation of the True Fields Cancer Awareness Festivals, Sophie Trew. Today I'm speaking to Sophie over the internet at her home in Brighton about her current passion, breathwork. Sophie, fabulous to have you back on the show.
Hi Robin, great to be back with you and catching up.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking primarily about breath work, and which is something you're focusing on. And I've noticed really that there are 2 techniques out there, both used liberally by people with cancer, and primarily I would say to manage emotions like anxiety, that kind of thing. But they seem on the face of it to be ridiculously simple. But they must be hugely effective as they're so incredibly popular and widespread. So that's EFT, Emotional Freedom Technique, and breath work. As I say, today we're going to focus on breath work, although I do notice that you do both. But a cynic looking at this would say, come on, I actually know how to breathe. It's something I've quite experienced that, in fact. Why would I start going to classes?
Great question. And I've worked with quite a few cynics. And it's often that thing that unless we maybe experience the tangible results for ourselves, this would seem like a weird concept. Essentially, to give a broad picture of it, every day we take 20,000 breaths. Most people are only using a fraction of their lung capacity, and that affects every system and function in our body. So the way we breathe can support our immune system, it supports our digestion, it can help us to regulate our nervous system, which in turn regulates our immune system. It can change our state probably quicker than any other tool that I've come across, just by taking, almost in those panic situations, people say, okay, take a breath. So it's one of the most tangible yet simple tools that we have. And your breath really is like a Swiss Army knife. So you can change your breathing pattern to increase your levels of energy. You can change by maybe breathing a bit deeper and quicker. You can change your breathing pattern to bring about a sense of relaxation, exhaling longer, deeper. You can change your breathing to bring more mental clarity, to even stimulate a cardio workout, for example. And there are many physical benefits to paying attention to the way that we breathe. And the reason, so for the cynics, okay, every day I breathe, I've been breathing my whole life. Well, if you breathe a little bit deeper and can open up your lung capacity, then potentially you can get so many more of those benefits. And it's also the way that we can change our heart rate. It's that kind of one system in our body that we can really control as well. It's the thing that happens naturally without any focus, but also the thing that when we put conscious focus on it. And the breath that I work with and a lot of people work with is conscious connected breath work. And the conscious element is I'm conscious of the way that I'm breathing. And by doing that, we can really oxygenate. It's transformative on a number of levels, mental, physical, spiritual. I've had clients that say for the first time in my life, I feel like I've realized I have a spirit, if that makes sense to anyone. It's almost this thing, it can take us into a different state. So whether that's a different brainwave state by moving more into the kind of theta brainwave, more in that kind of subconscious state, or just coming out of our usual way of thinking.
Okay, good sales job. Right, excellent. Very good. If you had asked me how many breaths I take a day, I wouldn't have come up with 20,000. That's for sure.
Also, it's the one thing, well, it's the one thing that connects us to everyone, because you're breathing in the oxygen that every other living being is breathing in. So it's this kind of universal air, essentially.
And interesting, as you point out, it's a kind of reflex action that's happening on its own in a certain kind of way, but it's not quite like your heart, is it? Because you know, just changing your heart rate at will is a bit trickier, but you can certainly change your breathing.
Do that. Yeah, you can do that through your breath.
Through your breath, right? Yeah, interesting. Okay, so yours is one of those stories in which you've had to find things to help yourself, and the successes that you've had have led you to want to share your discoveries with others who are in need of help. So I'm wondering if you mind telling us a bit of the backstory of how you got here.
Winding back. So, in fact, I'll go with the breathwork side of things and breathing. I was asthmatic from about the age of 11. Quite severe asthma, to the point of being allergic to horses, and I would kind of go to sleep at night, and sometimes I would find that I wasn't able to breathe. So I'd be doing that kind of wheezing thing, the kind of tightening. And then I had cancer diagnosis, blood cancer, when I was 23 in 2014. And previous to this, breathing-wise, no one ever said... So when I was going to the doctors and having checkups, no one ever said, well, how do you breathe? There was never a conversation about the functional element of the breath. It was just, we need to give you a stronger inhaler and more steroids and this kind of thing, and very drug focused. And then I got the diagnosis and didn't ever notice my breath or pay attention to how I was doing that. But it was about a year or 2 years afterwards, I was running True Fields, so a holistic cancer awareness festival. And we had a breathwork practitioner there running a workshop. And I ended up going along to that and discovering breathwork. It was a game changer. It was almost kind of, you know, those moments in life where you have that moment where you realize, okay, this is where I need to be. And they're kind of few and far between, but it was a real realization of, wow, actually, this can be such a game changer. And it was life-changing by changing my breathing pattern. I had 6 months of chemotherapy as well. And one of the drugs in the chemo that I had, bleomycin, it can cause lung toxicity. So not only asthma, and then I've got lung toxicity. After doing breath work, I don't have asthma anymore. It's not a thing. It's not. I remember afterwards, I just got all my inhalers, put them in the bin, and just knew that it was time. That was finished.
Is that common, that people with asthma can actually fix it with breath work?
Can definitely be supportive. There's other elements, so that I think sometimes we say it was this one thing, but there are other elements which inevitably, when I was healing from cancer, I was looking at my gut health, I was looking at inflammation, that kind of thing, and I think that definitely played a part. But very strongly was asthmatics are upper chest breathers. And there's almost this fear of breathing deep because it's caused you a challenge over the years. So you're kind of afraid to take a deep breath in. And it's almost rewiring that on a physical, mental level as well.
I can sort of imagine that, because I'm not that I've had asthma, but I know when you have a sort of irritable cough, you don't want to breathe in deeply because that's just going to kick it off, you know.
Exactly.
And, I assume it's like that.
Exactly. And it kind of comes to, how do we get into different positions, stretching wise, kind of yoga wise, to be able to open up the chest as well. Because if you think back to, have you got any pets, a dog or a cat? Or
I'm not a pet person, no.
Interesting. I resonate with that. So if you think back to children, or if you held a grandchildren or a young child, babies don't breathe only in their upper chest or their belly. They have this really fluid motion, and they don't hold their breath. Don't know if you've ever noticed when you're holding your breath throughout the day, sometimes we go and we don't let the breath go. Or if we're stressed or tense, we might be breathing with our shoulders and upper chest. And so the idea of this breath as well, as being that kind of Swiss Army knife tool that we can use, is to get us back to that kind of baby breath. When we came into the world and we didn't, because when we don't want to feel something, we hold our breath. So for every emotion, every emotional state, there's a different breathing pattern. So if we think about when we're shocked or stressed or kind of in grief, we go like this.
Yeah.
Or joy is kind of like that. And then if we're calm and relaxed, we're going to be breathing differently. It's just, it influences, it's very connected to everything.
Interesting. So you're saying in a way that holding a breath or that tightness is a kind of symptom of, you know, how we're responding to life, but actually if you change it, it can change the way you feel about life.
100%. And it's almost this kind of balance of, if we don't breathe into our bellies, the blood vessels in our belly send a signal to our brain that triggers anxiety. And often we don't breathe into our bellies because we're stressed or anxious. So it's this kind of
vicious cycle, right? Yeah.
The cycle of, all of it.
Yeah, interesting. So you mentioned there along the way Trew Fields. I feel we can't go past without just having a nod to the big story of Trew Fields, the incredible thing. I just wonder if you'd say a bit more about it, and particularly what you've come away with from the experience that informs what you're doing today.
Yeah. So we did a couple of interviews on the festival. So we started in 2017. After I had finished my treatment, I wanted to create an event that was inspiring, hopeful, and showed that we could approach cancer in a different way by bringing the community together, but also kind of being about enjoying ourselves, having music. There was comedy, there were different workshops and talks, and a lot of the people that inspired me in my cancer experience were part of it. So we ran it for, I think it was 3 years, and then COVID came in.
Yeah.
And so what that gave, I just absolutely loved it. It was a really, really special event to do. And then beyond that, when COVID happened, I realized I had to evolve myself as a therapist because there were no live events. So I started to develop my own practice, which I've always been coaching. I've always been doing kind of holistic cancer coaching for about 6 or 7 years, but it was more bringing in a therapeutic tool and other elements beyond that.
So I referred to the fact that it wasn't just breath work going on there, that you've actually trained in all sorts of things. Do you want to say a bit about what and why?
Yeah. So breathwork, I'm also a meditation teacher. I think for me, a really big focus or a big picture is how we can get into a healing state, that element of we heal in a healing state, and so much of cancer is stressful. So how can we then work with our nervous system, that nervous system regulation part of it's difficult to do because you've got the kind of hospitals and scans, and cancer has a very, as a word, it has a whole piece that's very activating. And a lot of the stuff that I'm working with is finding a way to bring in more balance and calm, even if it's just for that time, so we can be in a more resilient, it's building resilience. That I talk about it like longevity juice. So it's very kind of tailored to each person, but it's things like the breath work, meditation, and EFT, so emotional freedom technique, the tapping, and accountability. A lot of people say that they struggle with the accountability or that side of support.
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
A lot of it has been about working with the trauma that comes from going through the cancer experience. And we can do that in a breathwork session. We can start to gently release the tension and trauma that might be in the body, because we hold that. And so, yeah, our bodies, it's that thing of too much too soon and what we hold in our bodies. And a lot of a cancer process is too much too soon. So what happens when we don't discharge the energy of that experience, we hold it in our bodies. And so these tools can really, while being great for just general feel good, it can also help us on a deeper level to be able to move forward, or to be here now, this kind of presence process, rather than being back there then, if that makes sense.
It does make sense, yeah. I mean, one of the great things about this kind of understanding of mind-body medicine, it doesn't seem to matter which end you come at it from, the mind or the body. In fact, it's good to come from both, it seems to me. But sometimes something that's seen to be very much to do with the mind is actually a left field approach that comes in a much more practical, physical way, is actually a really good way to get in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, all totally interconnected, isn't it?
Yeah. It's all one thing, but it's like, well, what's going to work? That's the thing. And trying to ignore half of the picture definitely isn't a good way to go.
And I think the element of more somatic, more of the body side of things is really key, or even more of the emotions, just feeling your emotions. Because we have been very focused. And I know for me, I got really kind of focused on nutrition and what I was eating, and
exactly,
these kind of things. There was an element of control.
Yeah.
And then the other stuff of kind of being willing to be vulnerable or release emotions, or it's not something that's very supported in our culture as well, to be that expressive of our feelings. So, yeah.
The stiff upper lip prevails.
Yeah.
Well, absolutely, and it's more so amongst men than women as well. I mean, men are much rather give them a practical thing to get on with. They'd love that much more. So, especially if there's lots of research involved to go with it. But
that's why I like working with men with breathwork, for example, because meditation, a lot of people say, I can't meditate, I'm too busy. And again, we have the busy culture.
Right.
But breathwork gives you something to focus on. So it's almost like, obviously you can do walking meditations and different focused ones, but it kind of gives you a thing that can happen. You can get the benefits relatively quickly. And people know, because they start to feel tingly, they might start to feel different sensations, that kind of thing. And so it can take you into a meditative state quite quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's useful. It's very useful. Yeah. All right. So there you are. You've looked at various other avenues. Have you got any other ones you haven't told us about yet?
I'm getting particularly interested in sound.
Okay.
Sound
love
healing.
to hear about that. Yeah.
Sound healing and frequencies, and also I do Reiki as well, so I kind of do the energy healing.
Right.
And I did also train as a deaf doula, but it's more, for me, it's more about supporting, I think, with also the grief that we go through when we're living, rather than just the kind of the death of the physical body. It's more that the transitions, kind of endings and beginnings, that side of things as well.
Right. So you're saying there that actually looking at that in some depth has helped you to deal with people who are not necessarily dying, but some part of them maybe needs to die.
Yes.
Yeah, right. I understand. Interesting. Okay. And you said frequency there. Very interesting, because actually I've just spoken to Rob Verkerk about frequency medicine, and he brought in sound healing in there, and to do with colour and light as well, all the ways these different frequencies affect people. And he was talking, very much bringing in the science behind all that stuff. Fascinating interview I had with him.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very interested in the science of that, because it's really that thing of how do we get back to the frequency of health as well.
Yeah, well, he spoke about that quite a bit. So yeah, okay. So you've done all this stuff, and but breath work, I think, is at the heart of it all. This seems to be your passion. It's a thing that obviously caught your attention back there in True Fields, and you've been at it ever since. Let's if we can just find out a bit about it. Well, specifically, why you think that one technique is so valuable compared to all the other ones.
Yeah, because it is something that we all do the whole time. And again, the first and last thing that we do in our lives. And it can really, it's simple and practical, and it's right under your nose once you learn the techniques. And mainly from experience and seeing the results as well that people have, it's really powerful. And because of those reasons of it being able to support all of those internal functions, but also our mental state, our energy levels. Yeah, it's
right. So it's like a helpful technique that is ever present. You always have it with you.
100%. Have you ever done a journey?
As in the journey by Brandon Bayes.
Brandon Bayes is awesome. I mean, a breathwork journey.
I've done that, but I've not done I've done bits and pieces of breathwork, but I wouldn't say I've really engaged in anything serious.
Okay, we'll have to do a session one day.
Okay. So maybe you can tell us a bit about where it all comes from. I mean, who came up with the idea in the first place?
Yeah, so, well, it's been around for many, 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 many years, as has many of these healing tools that we've now kind of started to use a lot more. And originally, well, pranayama would go back to being used in yoga in India. And now these different techniques because there's so many different breathwork techniques, but they have evolved to being used now. And yeah, so conscious connected breathwork, which I use, was, well, I did transformational breath. It's a type of breathwork that was started by a woman called Judith Kravitz in the States. And then there is more kind of functional breathwork, which I've been learning about, which is all about supporting on a functional physical level. And obviously people are very focused on Wim Hof breathing. You're right. And again, the technique that he has used and coined goes back many, many, many years again to yoga practices in India. So it all goes back, thousands of years.
The dawn of time. Yeah, fair enough. And so do you think this is a particularly useful tool for people with cancer?
Yes, I do.
And why?
A number of different reasons. So there is the conversation that people diagnosed with cancer in general have low blood oxygen. And so elevating our levels of oxygen, for example, with the hyperbaric oxygen therapy, is really key. So we really need to elevate that oxygen, our blood oxygen. Really good to test for it too. So many factors. So immune system being a challenged, compromised immune system, increasing our chances of getting cancer. The way you breathe can really support your stimulation of your immune system, because if we're not breathing into our rib cage, our kind of that diaphragmatic breath, that muscle underneath our rib cage, then we're not going to be really getting that stimulation of it. A lot of people have digestive and gut health problems. The way that we breathe before food can affect that. So the stress levels, for example, we can really work with our stress levels by working with that in-breath and that out-breath. Your exhale is all about kind of the parasympathetic rest and digest response. So longer exhales can help you to relax, which in turn, we heal in a state of relaxation. So it's really key to find those moments to actively relax, to really focus on downtime. And again, it's a funny culture that we have to do that, because back in the day, we wouldn't be thinking about active relaxation, or there wouldn't necessarily be as much stimulation, but there was the challenges.
Yeah, and I think, this is one of the kind of great anomalies of cancer is that, of course, people get to realise that stress is a key factor in driving cancer, and the last thing you want to be if you're somebody who's actually got cancer is stress. But, of course, having cancer is enormously stressful in every possible way. And so some tools and techniques that are going to help you with that are, very valuable.
Really key. So it supports mentally, physically, emotionally, because the physical side, elevating blood oxygen, immunity, your digestion, your heart rate, all of those side of things. And then on the mental emotional side, it can help us to release suppressed emotions, which is a really key one.
Right.
So again, that exhale, it's about letting go. Your inhale is about taking in, exhale, you're letting it go.
And kind of the bigger picture maybe is more like in the arena you were talking about with the work with dying, is actually very often people with cancer are having to let go of their life as they knew it.
Exactly.
And that's a sort of death. And the exhale you just described could be a very big exhale of your past life.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it's those transitions.
Yeah.
And everyone has a unique breathing pattern. So it's like your like your fingerprint. Whenever anyone comes to breathwork, for example, most people have a dysfunctional breath. And by that may be that they hold their breath. So you might come across, I now start to watch people. So on the tube, I see that a lot of people breathe with their shoulders, or they have a tight upper chest. And a lot of people struggle to breathe into their bellies. And so that dysfunctional breath is the way you breathe says a lot about your emotional state as well. So we can kind of see that in a first kind of sitting. And then when you start to rewire that, it's going back to that baby breath. So how you used to breathe as a child before you felt fear or you experience loss or tension, all of the things, the first thing that we change when we experience emotions as a child is our breathing. So we start to maybe breathe a bit quicker, or we start to alter that function.
Which is a natural response to fear. Yeah.
It's your guide. It's almost your companion throughout your whole life, that inhale and exhale.
Right. Okay, so here I am. I decide I'm interested in breath work. What kind of thing do I expect?
So it's always unique, dependent on what you are after. So a typical session would include finding out where you want to get to, or what's your intention. And then we would work with some gentle movement to start to open up the body and release tension. And then there's the breath, there's guided breathwork techniques. So use a number of different techniques. Then we will bring in affirmations and visualization, because we know the power of visualizing, the fact that our body doesn't know the difference. Well, we don't know the difference between what we imagine and what actually happens. So the power of visualizing in the mind, that might be visualizing a picture of health, or visualizing something that you want to move towards, so we can start to plant the seeds of it. And then there is self-massage. So usually I work online, so it would be kind of guiding you to massage different parts of your body that might need some care. And then we end with a deep relaxation. So sometimes with a yoga nidra, which is a sleep meditation, or just a time of full rest with the music. With different
UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good. UK Health Radio, the station that makes you feel good.
That you just described as being online, is that how you're generally working with people?
Yes, I have been, because I can do it wherever.
Yeah.
So during COVID, during times, it kind of went that way to be able to be accessible.
Yeah.
And the best thing is it actually works just as well, because for me, it's all about that empowerment thing of knowing that you can do this without a practitioner with you.
Mm-hmm.
So once you've done however many sessions are appropriate for you, to then have it as a tool that you can just do in your everyday life. So if people can do it online and they do self-massage and they're kind of reconnecting to their body, which again, another benefit for cancer is we lose trust with our bodies. And so sometimes it doesn't feel like a safe place. And breathwork is your breath is the bridge between your mind and your body. So it's the thing that can bring you into your soma, your body, and come a bit more out of your head, which feels really key. So we can start to kind of rebuild that safety, that trust.
Right. Just to be clear about that one, for people who haven't experienced it, do you want to say a bit more about why cancer makes people lose trust with their body?
I think everyone's reasons are different, because it's such a unique experience that people have. So I think for some people, it is the fact that you feel like your body tried to kill you, some people say, or some people say, I had no idea this was going on. It made me lose trust in my body because I didn't notice it was happening. Or some people think that their body's against them. It's that side of things. And then for others, they've had surgery or they've had treatment and it doesn't feel like a safe place, or you've had a part of your body removed and that doesn't feel safe. It's a constant reminder, or there's the scars. So yeah, so many factors.
Right. Okay. So do you always work one-to-one?
I do. I also do groups. So I actually run a Breathwork for Cancer monthly workshop as well, which is great.
Okay. And how many people come along to one of those?
So we've had up to 80 people in the past. 80?
Yeah. All right. Lots. Okay. I thought you were going to say 8.
No. So one-to-one, you're able to work deeper because you're working on the specific thing for that person. So it's almost like any one-to-one session, it's deeper and you can get quicker results. Group, it's kind of more surface, kind of common elements to it.
And how long is a typical session or a class?
So typical one-to-one would be about an hour and a half. And then a group one would be an hour to an hour and 15 minutes.
Okay. All right. So I'm just thinking it'd be useful, for people who are particularly familiar with all the challenges of cancer, what are the places in which breathwork could be useful to them, the specifics, in situations or conditions or...
Yes. So... Again, Robin, all the situations, because it's a tool that you've got the whole time. So let's say you're waiting for a call from the doctor, you're waiting for scan results. You can start taking a few deep breaths in. If you, maybe for example, you could do a 4-7-8 breath. So you breathe in for 4, you hold for the count of 7, and then exhale through your mouth for the count of 8. That's going to help you down regulate. So you're going to feel more calm by doing a few rounds of that. Before bed, for me, when I just had chemo and I was then given steroids, I'd be awake all night long, feeling pretty wired. So let's say you're awake in the night, you've just had your day of treatment. The way that you breathe can then help you to get to sleep. It's kind of can help you to create the setting or the conditions for more rest. Then you're sitting in hospital, you're in your chair, you can do some deep breathing to bring about a sense of calm. And then also, I think on the trauma level that we've spoken about briefly, it's if we are able to breathe into those moments of challenge, to be really present with our body, we're less likely to have that knock-on mental challenge effect afterwards, because we can kind of discharge a bit of that energy. And that might just be doing a body scan, for example, kind of okay, bringing yourself here now and actually being embodied in hospital, like feeling your ankles, noticing your breath, maybe taking a hand to your belly, to your upper chest, taking a few breaths in. It can be supportive in so many situations.
So, there's lots of bits and pieces. There's lots of reasons to have anxiety for a start, aren't there?
Yeah.
And so there's lots of situations that create anxiety fairly naturally. I mean, waiting for your scan results, you're going to be anxious, whoever you are.
Of course.
And it's fair enough. So that's great from that point of view. But kind of underlying all of those is the anxiety of death. You've got this existential anxiety. So is that something you meet head on with breath work, or is it something that because you're dealing with lots of bits and pieces, it all adds up to helping?
I think it all adds up to helping.
Mm-hmm.
So on the death side, it's almost, if we can practice, not practice, but if we can practice letting go a little bit more, or for example, in the doula work, it's exploring what is your relationship to death. How can you start to maybe develop more of a relationship to death? And that can come from being in nature, from seeing the different cycles. Inevitably, there's always going to be a fear there, or an association, but it's how to make it, or move towards making it less huge, like less of the elephant, less of the iceberg, and breaking it down. For me, and it's a different topic, but for me, what has actually helped more with fear of death is psychedelic therapy. And so that's a different topic in itself. But for example, mushrooms can really support and in different countries where this is an accessible thing, people do use that for end of life. There is the talk of mushrooms, psilocybin for end of life, because if you can experience ego death, which you can also experience in a breathwork after a while, or in meditation, if we experience what it's like to die before we die, that can really help with the fear of death.
Yeah, well, it's a topic that comes up more and more often, I've got to say, psychedelics, in my interviews with all sorts of different people, because, it's becoming pretty clear that they are enormously important things for our times, particularly, because, you don't just need to look at cancer, you just need to look at the levels of depression
100%
across society and the things that people are dealing with.
And again, how far back that goes as well. It's thousands and thousands. And I think, Jesus was found with mushrooms in his pocket.
There you go. So, I think it is an enormously important topic. It's a huge relief that it's sort of coming out of the closet, having had the large boot put down firmly on it some years back, that actually, despite the fact it's still illegal, it's being talked about everywhere. And, I think it is increasingly obvious that as a way to help people who are dealing with things like existential distress or depression, that it's enormously important and far more effective than anything the pharmaceutical industry has come up with to date. And, I've had a lady I interviewed on this show who actually spent her whole life researching pharmaceutical drugs to help with mental health issues. She dumped everything when she found out about what you can do with mushrooms, and was devoting all of her attention to that because they're so remarkable.
Fantastic. I think it's really important. Nature is a gift from nature, and yet we've kind of made that illegal. It's there's a lot. We lost about 50, 60 years, but we're definitely having that renaissance in it, which is important. And I've spoken to friends about kind of having psychedelic hospices where, because it has been, for me, it's been the most powerful tool for letting go and that kind of fear of death and grief around it.
Interesting. So, obviously it's of great interest to you on a personal level. Do you see yourself going anywhere with it on a professional level? I mean, it can't happen here, but it can happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to. I think with breathwork, again, we can go to that altered state, and psychedelics even more so. And it really does have really powerful, as you said, for existential crisis, for end of life, really amazing results and research in America in hospices. I would love to work with the breath, with mushrooms, and really sound, the kind of full package.
Right. Okay.
I did do an integration training in psychedelics earlier in the year, which I think is important, is how to integrate so you can continue to have the benefits of the experience. It's kind of the key aspect with a lot of things is that integration. Making sense of what happened and how to then put it into
that is important.
Your life.
I mean, that's in a way is one of the exciting things about psychedelics, is that they're demonstrating that with a very minimal intervention, which consists of 1, 2, 3 sessions, you can make a pretty absolute change, something from which people don't go back. But as you say, it gives you an awful lot to work with going forward. And, what you just described as integration would be a way of sort of maximising on the experience.
Absolutely.
And, getting the most from it.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's really key.
Yeah. Well, the science is building for that. I'm glad to say there's a huge amount of research going on. How about the science of breathwork? Is there a science behind breathwork?
There definitely is, yeah. And there's things that you can do. There's a lot of the gadgets that people have to measure oxygen, to measure breathing. But there's a lot of research around breathwork happening. But I think more so it would be inspiring to do more research in hospital settings and that kind of thing. So there's more to come of it. And I think, again, where's the research, where's the money? People are there's a lot of conversation, a little bit like the CBD cannabis conversation a few years ago. It's now psychedelics, and there's a lot of investment and a lot of interest in that. So inevitably there's going to be quite a bit more focus, I think.
All right. So say someone's sort of interested to know more about breathwork before they actually get stuck in, or or maybe there's somebody who likes to sort of dive in and learn about what they want to get involved in. Can you point us towards some good resources you found, helpful books, videos, whatever?
So book-wise, if you research breathwork, there are some really good books. There's Breathe In, Breathe Out by Stuart Sandeman, which has just come out, BreathPod. And if you look on Headspace, for example, or Insight Timer, the free app, you can get different sessions on there. I think they've just done a 14-day breathwork course on Insight Timer. And there's lots of resources out there if you research.
Mm-hmm. And is there kind of people you consider the world leaders in this field?
World leaders are all going to be in that conference that you shared with me, actually, Robin, the Shift Network.
Right, Shift Network. Okay. And do you want to finish off by telling people where they can find out more about you and contact you?
Yeah, so I also do a chat with people before on anything breathwork related or coaching related anyway, just to connect. I think, as we spoke about, it's really important to resonate with the practitioner that you work with first. So I do that. People can contact me. So my website is sophietrew.com, TREW, and I'm on Instagram, and they can email me on the website.
Very good. Okay, so and if people want to look up that event, it's a Breathwork Summit from the 9th to the 13th of January next year. So, okay, fantastic. Thanks very much for that whistle-stop tour of Breathwork et al.
Thank you,
really
Ruben.
Interesting. And thanks for coming on the show to tell us all about it.
Thank you so much. Sending love.
All right, bye. So, as I mentioned during the interview, Sophie's been on the Esther Life show before, speaking about true fields, and if you'd like to hear more from her, or indeed explore the massive back catalogue of almost 400 other shows that are still available, go to yesterlife.org.uk, look down the homepage until you see the link to the radio show page, and once you're there, apart from seeing the most recent shows, you'll see we now have 3 search boxes where you can look for topics, guests or keywords. Just start typing Sophie's name in the guest search box and hit the search button to find all her shows. Also, I referred to the previous show in which I interviewed Rob Verkerk about energy medicine. If you'd like to listen to that, you'll find full details there as well. And while I'm talking about the Yes to Life website, if you're not familiar with all the services on offer there, I do encourage you to look around. Under the I'm New Here menu, you'll find Our Services, which collects everything on one page and gives you a good overview with links to further details. We like to think there's something for everyone there, whether it's joining a Wigwam support group, calling our helpline, searching our online resources, which include our extensive life directory of therapies and providers, our book, our peer-to-peer mentoring scheme, and much, much more. Thanks so much for listening today. I hope you'll want to listen throughout 2023. I foresee some very exciting developments in the world of integrative medicine this year, so I'll be aiming to bring you news of them and the insights of the leaders in the field throughout the year. I look forward to joining you again next week for the next edition of the Yes to Life show here on UK Health Radio. Goodbye.